Tom, appreciate you. Tom and I worked each other on, is it CW or was it VAR? I can't
No, it would
remember.
have. It was Vara, I think. One of my
Yeah,
earlier contacts on
yeah.
Vara, and you came back with the look at your QRZ page, and
Yeah,
you do amateur. You're into satellites, and you do presentations. Would you do a presentation for the club?
exactly.
I've
So
had
I would,
several of these that have come out of QSOs,
yeah,
which is
that's
fun.
great. I think it was VAR. I'd have to go back and look at the logbook.
I would too, but I do kind of remember it
Yeah.
now. It was early
So,
on in my
really
time.
appreciate, it's not the easiest thing in the world to come up with good programs. So
Nope.
we do appreciate you doing it in advance. And I'll be quiet, let you tell a little bit about yourself, where you
Well,
are, what you do,
very good.
and
I appreciate
you
the
got it.
insight.
Thank you.
And I want to apologize in advance. My voice has been kind of just weird. It's all scratchy, and so I'm going to be sipping water as I go through this, and hopefully it'll be fine. And I've been a ham since 1985. Been uh, an extra light since the early uh, 2000s when they did that. But and I'd known about amateur satellites, but I had never thought that it was something that I could do. And I uh, ended up with a friend, Keith, the late Silent Key, Keith Pugh, W5IU, who was a big AMSAT guy. He was a ARIS Amateur Radio and International Space Station mentor, and he says, you can do this, and um, and nudged me along to getting involved, and I've enjoyed it ever since. Because I was a space nut as a kid, I figured out ways to try to stay home for Gemini launches. My parents, I could be sick. My parents figured it out real quick and said, "No, you're going to school." So anyway, let me start the presentation here. Present now. Change this. Go to that. And here we go. Should see my title page right now. Um, we're going to concentrate on a lot of different on FM satellites, but we're going to talk about other things, and I'm going to just give you some terminologies and some concepts to think about, and I'm going to give you places you can find more information on. This is me out on my driveway with my Yaesu FT847 and my Arrow antenna on tripod, all manually controlled. The computer, however, is driving the 847 and then at this time I was making some contacts on the RS-44 linear transponder satellite. So I don't have an antenna on the roof. I just have the portable, either a handheld site setup or this setup for doing satellite stuff. We're going to talk about an introduction to amateur satellites and things that you need to know to get started here, or at least to give you the information as to maybe how to start listening, and then get your feet dipped in a little wet later on. So stick around. It's going to be kind of a fast ride, but I'll be open for questions later on, and we'll go from there. There's different types of amateur radio satellites. There are FM repeaters. Those are the easy ones. Linear transponders, I mentioned. They do SSB and CW. There's digital packet and BPFK type stuff. Specialty modes, digital voice has been tried once or twice, and a lot of telemetry only satellites, or I call them bleep sats, but they have a good purpose and a good use as well. And all of these use amateur radio frequencies. Here's a fairly complete list of what's currently active right now, whether they're linear transponders or FM, or in the case of IO 117 down, that's an AX25 Satellite. Oh, yes, and I'm wrong. I actually have something wrong here. I just see it is not a UV. It's actually a UU, meaning it is got one frequency, 435.310, for both up and down. So I just see a problem. I'll have to fix that one in the presentation. But a lot of different modes, a lot of different opportunities. All of these are low Earth orbiting satellites, meaning they're between 300 and or 250 and maybe 1,000 miles, except for Green Cube, IO 117, and we'll talk about that in a little bit because it's a medium Earth orbit satellite. It's at 3,600 miles up. AMSAT and many other organizations have created what are called have embraced the CubeSat model. That's a little, that is the engineering model for the Fox series of satellites from AMSAT. It is a 10 by 10 by 10 centimeter cube that weighs about 1 kilogram or 2.2 pounds. That's a standard single unit CubeSat form factor. AMSAT, um, you know, built the satellite, the space frame, and got some free launches, and we had to pay for some. The free launches were because we offered up to 4 experiment boards that were picked up by various universities like Vanderbilt and Virginia Tech and Iowa State and Penn State, and those allowing educational use of the amateur radio spectrum gave us some free launches from NASA's educational launch of nano satellites program. We still have to pay for the integration costs and such like that, but at least the launch ride was free. And these are a couple of satellite plans that the organization has coming up. Fox Plus, which will be a newer generation of the Fox FM satellites, Golf T and Golf Greater Orbit, larger footprint. There's no launches scheduled for any of these right now, but we're hoping. And the organization is also offering, if you have a connection with a university that has a satellite program or a space avionics program or whatever, we're offering the IHU receiver and transmitter stack to any school that wants to put it aboard their CubeSat. And so we'll help you with the communications. You help us get amateur radio in space, and we'll help options for your experiments to get their data down to Earth. A lot of international AMSAT organizations as well. We're all not related, but we are, because we have an interest in launching and operating amateur radio satellites. So we're going to get started with FM satellites. Why FM? Because it's an easy on-ramp. Most of us have some form of an FM radio or two, some of which are dual band, some of which are single band. Almost all of the amateur radio satellites that currently exist use either the VHF or the UHF band, or mostly both. Like if it's an FM repeater, it's a crossband repeater. You might uplink on 2 meters, you'll downlink on 70, or vice versa. There at one point was a couple of satellites that did 1.2 gig. And then, of course, back in the 80s, there were several high Earth orbiting satellites that also had signals all the way up into the microwave bands, 10 gigahertz and all. So, but right now we're kind of limited to V and U. So you do want to know what kind of equipment you need to use. Yeah, how do I know where the satellites are? How do I know what frequencies they're on? How do you track a satellite? What do I say? And tips about the best operating practice. This is the stuff we're going to talk about here. What equipment? Well, of course, we would prefer a radio that could operate in full duplex. And I'll explain why in a minute. That's a really important thing. Or you could use multiple radios, two radios that maybe operate single band, but you can use one as a transmitter and one as a receiver, depending upon which satellite mode you're using. There are some dual band mobile radios that actually make good FM satellite radios. Some of the Yaesus, like I used to have an 8800 or an 8900, some of the ICOM radios are dual band, dual listen, full duplex capable, and they make actually pretty good satellite radios for portable or sometimes mobile use. I don't recommend it that way, but I'll explain why later. I own one of these, the Kenwood D72A. It's probably the favorite dual band radio. You can't buy new anymore, but it's uh, most guys, if they've been doing this for a while, have a D72 because it is a good radio. It has it's very sensitive receiver. It doesn't desense very much. It can a little bit. And I'll explain the desense thing here. When you transmit on 2 meters, 70 centimeters is the third harmonic. And so you get products of that. And if those products from the same antenna get back into the receiver, you'll kind of end up blocking that the receiver's ability to hear. The D72 is not perfect, but it is better than many radios. Again, various different mobile radios. The older Kenwoods had good dual band, dual listen. ICOM, Yaesus, some of their dual band radios. I do have some documentation that is maybe a couple years old, but it does give a listing of different handhelds or mobiles or all mode radios that you can get that can do satellites. Of course, there's the 9700, which a lot of setups with home stations have gotten into because it does have a full satellite mode and is easily controlled by software. I own an older 25, 30-year-old now radio FT or 25 FT847, which was the late 90s, early 2000s Yaesu, but it does have a wonderful satellite mode as well. It's actually a very nice radio for this. Or you could do a couple of 817s, 818s, stack them together. One does VHF, one does UHF. You might have to do a little bit of swapping as to which one is the one you talk on, depending upon the satellite you are, but that's a really nice combination. You can stick those into a nice little backpack and have them with their internal batteries and an external antenna, and off you go. Antennas are a big part. I don't recommend trying to even think about doing amateur satellites with a rubber duck. It's or even some of the you'll see YouTube videos from a while back of people using some of those extended whip antennas that have been out there. They have some gain, but they don't have directivity, and you should not transmit unless you hear the satellite, and that's to provide, because so often you hear people, they don't hear the satellite, but they're still calling CQ, which they're not supposed to do anyway on FM, and they will just calls QRM, but they can't hear you. You call them and they will not respond because they're not listening on the right frequencies, or they're doing something wrong. So you really should always listen and before you transmit. I like the Aero antenna. I have one. This is me on the coast of Maine trying to do a little cross Atlantic. I didn't really succeed at that, but it is possible. It's the basic arrow is 3 elements on 2 and 7 elements on 70 centimeters, but you can get an extended version, a little harder to handhold, but it has 4 and 11. So that does give you a little more gain. The elk antenna is another commercially produced. It is a log periodic. It was designed to work on 2 meters, but it really works fairly decent on 70 as well. I do have one as well. It's nice to lay down on the back seat of your car because with the arrow, with the crossband elements, it's kind of hard to keep that flat and from bouncing around. So the elk is nice for that, but I am not as fond of it as a receiving antenna. And then there's some homebrews. This guy here, the VE2ZAZ, you can find his plans online. But I really like my local guy, Kent Britton WA5VJB. Go onto Google and search cheap Yagi or cheap Leo antenna, and you will get a PDF file that has the instructions and dimensions to build this thing, which is an inline 2 meter and 70 centimeter antenna. He gives you the instructions for rolling your own little duplexer on a pencil, or if you have a nice VNA, you can find for 2 separate radios, you can have 2 separate feed points, one on the 2 meter element, one on the 70 centimeter element, and you can find the feed points there, and you can create two separate coax feeds rather than the one on the duplexer. But I like Kent. His antenna works really well. In fact, I have a friend of mine, Virginia Smith, N5F, who has built one of those, and she uses 2 antennas. And if we're sitting side by side in a parking lot trying to work satellites, she'll get, well, the female voice helps, but she'll do better than I will. So that's a good vote of confidence for Kent's antenna. Of course, you may need adapters, so make sure you get adapters that you can get your antennas on and off your radios, whatever they be. The D72 has SMA connectors, but my Aero diplexer has B and C's, so sometimes I got to take things off and on. You want some other accessories to take along with you. You might want a smartphone to tell where you are, or you might want a voice recorder to record those QSOs because they're going to happen really fast. You will probably need headphones or a headset mic. You want to make sure you have the adapters. If you have two radios and 1 antenna, you might need a diplexer for that. If you have, like in my case, 2 antenna feeds and 1 radio, you will need the diplexer as well. Compass is always a good thing, but the compass on your phone does work pretty well. There's some, how do you know where the satellites are? Used to be back in the old days, they'd send out these 2-line Keplerian elements and you had to mathematically compute them yourself. Well, that wasn't a lot of fun. And then there were some paper guides that you could use to help track satellites. But now we have smartphones and computers that can run some nifty software that can help you locate what satellites they're out there and where they are and when they'll be coming over your head. I've listed a couple iPhone and Android apps here. For iPhone, and there's SatSat, which is not my favorite. GoSat Watch, which it has wonderful, wonderful graphics. That one is showing a sky view, but there's also a looking down at Earth and orbital view, which is quite nice. For both iOS and Android, there is ISS Detector. It's free for just the ISS, but if you want to track other satellites, pay the $2.99 and get the whole package, and you'll be you'll be very happy. And also for free for Android, there's the AMSAT Droid, but it's a pretty old in the tooth, not been updated for a long time. So I don't recommend that. For Android, I would recommend ISS Detector Pro, but I know I have some other friends who have some other Android apps that they like as well. For PCs, the best one is SatPC32. It is been around for a long time. The developer from Germany, he's built it 25 or 30 years ago, originally 25 years ago, and he still supports it. And it can control radios for Doppler correction. It can control rotors. For the Mac Doppler is out there as well. GPredict is another cross-platform. It'll work. There are builds for Windows, for Mac, and for Linux. GPredict is a free program. So if you want to get started there, that's a kind of a fun place to start. SatPC32 and Mac Doppler are for pay. SatPC32, all proceeds go directly back to the AMSAT organization to help fund stuff. There's some online resources like N5HYP and little QRM from my dog in the background. And the AMSAT Argentina has a cool satellite tracking page as well called PASS. That link there should get you to them. And of course, there's the good old fashioned from the AMSAT.org website, their text-based pass prediction, which is how I started about 13, 14 years ago. That's all I did is I went and loaded in my grid square and latitude, longitude, what satellite I wanted to pick, and how many passes I wanted it to print out. And I would get this list and I would print it out. So I knew when in the next couple of days I could go out and catch AO51. Now, another thing that you do need to know is that not all of these satellites are on all the time. And DF2ET in Germany has created this nifty little web page which does parse several different websites and Twitter feeds, and will tell you when certain satellites like the Tevel satellites and Lilacsat-2 and UVSQ sat and such are currently active. And then we'll talk about finding frequency information too in just a little bit, because that's something you need to know, is what frequencies to listen to. And so I've talked about satellite passes a little bit. Low Earth orbiting satellites orbiting between like 250 miles for the space station up to about 1,000 miles for RS-44 have limited availability throughout the day. There may be 5 or 6 usable passes during the day for any of these. It's because we're going to talk about a concept called the footprint. Remember, as you guys out near the mountains, when you're down on the plain, you can see so far to the horizon. When you're up high at 10,000 feet, you see a lot farther. That's why you take your microwave gear up there and work the 10 gigahertz and up contest. But the concept of the pass is all these satellites have, like the ISS is a 10.5-minute pass because it's only at about 260 miles. RS-44 up at about 1,000 miles has a 23-minute pass. Green Cube, which is up at 3,600 miles, has a pass of about an hour and a half. So the higher up you are, the bigger the footprint, and the longer the available time from horizon to horizon for a given satellites. But so AOS is the acquisition of signal when the satellite comes over the horizon. TCA, time of closest approach or max elevation, is when the satellite is closest to overhead over your location, and LOS is the loss of signal at the end of the pass. We're talking about footprints. The ISS at 260 miles approximately. You can kind of get a feel. This is by the way, this is the Earth view version of GoSat Watch. You can choose any number of different satellites to track, and it will show you where it is. It'll actually kind of give you, as you can kind of see over the um, top right corner of the Earth, you can kind of see its orbital height actually represented, and the red circle is the footprint. ISS can cover most of the U.S. at one point or other if it is in the proper place, but not always. Oh, come on here. I'm trying to make page work. There we go. Now this is AO7, which is about 900 miles up. And you can see a bunch of other satellites being depicted there. You can see that the footprint's a lot larger. From the east coast of the United States, AO7 folks can hit Europe on AO7. It is actually a linear transponder. It does CW and SSB. And real quick, the quick story on that one, it was launched in 1973. It worked until 1978, 79. Then the batteries died and it died, and everybody thought, oh, it's gone. 2003, it was discovered to be operational during daylight. The battery had died so significantly that it was just a lead brick, and the solar panels could power the satellite by itself when it came out of eclipse. So, and it's still working today. And this is a green cube, which is a polar orbit, but you can see that it's a lot higher at 3,600 miles. In fact, if you look in the, it is 3,635 miles at this at, at this instance here when I took the picture. It has a large footprint because it's a polar orbit. It is actually capable of letting you do significant DX. From there out in Denver, you could, in a single pass, work Japan and Europe. So it's kind of it's been a nice asset. But I got a couple stories to tell you about it in just a little bit. Now, because these are crossband or dual band satellites, you have to transmit on one frequency and receive on another. And that's accepting of the APRS satellites, like the space station when it is doing APRS. There's actually several other APRS capable satellites. They do transmit on the same frequency as they receive on. But most cases you're doing ups and downs on different bands. And you will thus have to deal with Doppler effect, just like a truck or a train horn as it's approaching you seems to get lower in frequency, and then it continues to get lower as it passes away. That's minus 3.5 kilohertz. On 70 centimeters, it's plus or minus 9.5 kilohertz. And if we were working 23 centimeters, you're about plus or minus 20 some odd kilohertz. And for the upcoming ham TV on the International Space Station at 2.4, you're going to be talking 50 or more kilohertz for that Doppler shift from AOS to LOS. Here's a couple of examples here. AO91, SO50 is a UHF downlink satellite. So you start the pass about, it's Its nominal frequency for what it transmits that we receive is 436.795. But when we start the pass, we tune our receiver 10 kilohertz high. And then as the satellite gets closest to TCA, it moves pretty fast, the frequency shift, and then it slows down and drops you down to minus 10 kilohertz. So you will have to, so you end up programming a number of memories on your radio. I would start, I would keep my, because most of our handhelds only have 5 kilohertz spacing for their channeling sizes. Uh, that 3.5 kilohertz on 2 meters for the uplink, we just don't need to touch. We just leave it alone. But for downlink, I will probably start at 436,805 and then move downward in frequency uh, as the pass progresses. There's another interesting twist to amateur satellites or the uplink frequency. Basically, we deal with the Doppler shift in reverse. Remember, we think we're standing still and the satellite's moving, but the satellite thinks it's standing still and we're moving. So it starts hearing us maybe 10 kilohertz above where its nominal frequency is. So we start off by taking our uplink frequency on 70 centimeters and go 10 kilohertz below the proper frequency and then move up as the pass goes along. That took me a little while to wrap my head around. And this is kind of the same deal here. The downlink and 145 960, we can leave it there and don't move it on our FM radios, but we will be moving the uplink frequency up in frequency as the pass moves along. Yeah, a little caveman. He's still dragging his antenna around, but we're gonna get him on the air pretty soon. What frequency you need to be on? Well, it depends upon the satellites. There's VU and UV, and I've talked about that. Normally, the downlink band or uplink band is in uppercase, and the downlink band is in lowercase. So if you see this type of listing, that's how you can kind of tell which direction you're going to be working. And the IARU does have satellite bands. On 2 meters, it's 145.8 to 146, and we get a full 3 megahertz on 70 centimeters, and there's a whole bunch of other bands. There's a bunch of things above 2 meters that have satellite frequencies. Almost everything above 2 meters has satellite frequencies. FM satellites, they're easy. That's fine. And if you're an AMSAT member, you get this as a good resource, and they try to put this out every year. It's called our frequency guide. The 2023 one is pretty current, but satellites come and satellites go, so it's not. In fact, we're fixing to lose a couple. We just lost a couple, and we're fixing to lose a couple. And hopefully, a couple new ones are on the docket for launch in the next couple of months, I guess. So that's a good place, but there's also AMSAT.org. If you go to their website and look on the menu ribbon for satellite information, and then drop down to communications satellites, and I'll show this again later on. They have a page that lists current and upcoming FM satellites and current and upcoming linear transponder satellites, but they also have information on the various digital data satellites that are up there. It's not totally current. There's a couple of flaws I saw the other day, but it's So we talked about, how do I track a satellite? Well, you have to know again what the facts that you need to know is what is the azimuth it'll come over the horizon from 0 to 360, north to south to north, and then at what direction, what azimuth will be the maximum elevation. So it might be coming over the horizon at 32 degrees. Maximum elevation TCA will be at 65 degrees in azimuth and 23 degrees elevation, and then the LOS, where it drops below the horizon, might be at 92 degrees azimuth or due south. So you got to know those couple pieces of information, coupled with the time, when those times are, what time is the LOS, what time is the AOS, and what time is the TCA, and or mid pass. And you can kind of begin to get used to guiding yourself. If you have a watch that displays you the proper time that you can glance at periodically, you can gauge where you need to be in the pass based on just those pieces of information. So if you're doing it manually, it's very doable. Of course, we all do know that antenna polarity does make a difference. That if the antenna is horizontally polarized and you're horizontally polarized, you will have the best signal. Cross pole loses you about 20 dB. But some of our satellites are spinning so fast you can't follow it. I think AO73, the AMSAT UK linear transponder, was spinning at about 20 times a minute. So no, you'd never follow it. You just pick an orientation for your antenna and go. For FM satellites, because it's a single channel repeater, we do not do long QSO rag chews in a 10-minute pass where there are 20 people who might want to be making contacts. So basically, we're just exchanging call sign and grid squares. Here's just a couple of how to work a pass, program a radio, use headphones or a speaker to, if you have a full duplex radio like my D72 with a speaker right next to the microphone, you want to be in full duplex, but you would like to use headphones, or I use an external speaker that I have on the ground. Pick a satellite to work and pick a location where you have clear skies, and verify that the times, the azimuth, and the elevation, like I mentioned. And you want to open up your squelch wide. You do not want to be in squelch mode, because we're talking low, weak signal work here. SO50 outputs at about 250 milliwatts, and it's at the horizon might be about 1,000 miles away or more. So there's just not a lot of signal to work with, and if your radio is in squelch mode, you will not hear it when it first pops over the horizon. Listen for the satellite. Make sure, usually there's gonna be somebody else on. It's a rarity where you will share a satellite all to yourself. It does happen, but it's rare. Listen. And you may think you need 3 hands, but you'll get a hold of it. And this guy, if you note, he's got his microphone up above his head, so nobody's going to hear him when he talks. So that's really not. Sometimes you do feel like this, but you eventually do get the handle of it. And my recommendation is, before you start, listen. Spend some time learning to listen, learning what goes on, learning how these QSLs go, how rapid fire they are. Learn how to track and follow it. learn how to follow the Doppler. That'll go a long way. This is just kind of the review, tips and tricks stuff. I've talked about all this already. But there's a lot more things you can do. Linear transponders, SSB and CW. The cool thing about this is with an FM repeater, it's single channel, and you know what happens terrestrially when two or more people transmit. You got a double, and the strongest station wins, or nobody wins. With a linear transponder, the satellite listens to a swath, maybe 20 kilohertz wide, 30 kilohertz wide, 50 kilohertz wide. In the case of the now kind of aging FO29, it had 100 kilohertz wide transponder. Everybody in the transponder shares the power of the satellite, but you can have multiple QSOs going on simultaneously. So thus you use the lowest power possible because you don't want to hog all the satellite's power budget just with your QSO. So, and again, 5-watt radios like this work wonderfully for FM satellites, work wonderfully for the linear transponders as well. Software-defined radios make good receivers, and in some of the cases now, like Lime and other radios, even good transmitters, but they don't put out much power, so you have to you need to work on a power amp that will help boost your output from a couple of milliwatts to at least a couple of watts to be able to work. SDRs and real radios can be enhanced quite nicely by using satellite tracking software that can control the uplink and the downlink frequency, and if you have an antenna on a rotor, can drive that as well. Ham Radio Deluxe does have a satellite app. I don't use it. Used to have some problems. I'm hoping that the paid version has fixed some of those now that they have some money to make them happy. But HDR radio console, I haven't seen anything about it anymore. It was written by a guy by the name of Simon Brown in England, but I haven't seen much said about that anymore, so I'm not even sure it's good. APRS is a cool thing to do. The ISS used to have a very functional 24/7 APRS system, which ARIS still does support, but the Russians have stowed the radio. So the ISS is no longer a really good digipeater in the sky. There are a couple of other satellites that do APRS on 145.825. Green Cube, like I said, is a digital data satellite working in AX25. It's the one that's 3,600 miles up, and it is there are folks who have obtained a DXCC purely on Green Cube now, and it's only been operational for about a year. So that's kind of it does take a little bit of antenna gain, and it may take a little bit of transmit gain because, again, it's a single channel for both up and downlink. So just like with the old packet radio days, if you remember that, it's very easy to have collisions. A number of satellites are data only or have a data component to them for experiments. This is depicting the FunCube dashboard for the AMSAT UK FunCube satellites, AO73, and they gave their transponders with their data downlink and their linear transponders and data downlink to other organizations, and you can downlink their data from the satellite, and then their dashboard software has linked to an internet repository, and your packets get aggregated with other packets being received by other hams all around the world, and that gives information about the health of the satellite, information related to the experimental packages that might be on board. There's a group called SatNogs that that's what they do. They set up omnidirectional antennas and SDR receivers and special software, and they downlink data from multiple different satellites and upload them to various repositories. It's a cool listening habit. If a good resource out there, although it's not as current as we would like, because the last version was published in print in 2020 as the Getting Started with Amateur Satellite book. So there are satellites that are going to be listed in here that no longer exist, and there are satellites that have been launched since that are not talked about. But it is great. It is a great resource still. $15 for a download at the AMSAT store, and it'll give you a lot of basic information. It'll fill in a lot of gaps that I've even missed maybe here. And of course, the AMSAT.org satellite information. This is what I was talking about here. The communication satellites. This is the linear transponder satellite frequency page, which tells you what you need to know about what frequencies each particular satellite would be on. In the case of a linear transponder, you have a bottom end and a top end. And of course, those are Doppler corrected. And another thing about most linear transponder satellites is they are inverting transponders, which means if you uplink on the bottom end of the transponder frequency range, it comes out from the satellite on the top end, and vice versa. You uplink on lower sideband, you downlink on upper sideband. And so that's what we mean by an inverting transponder. It actually does help with Doppler correction a little bit if you're manually tuning, but and then AMSAT.org also has a satellite status page where you can see which satellites are currently active right now. The blue reports are stations reporting that they have heard other stations on the satellite. If it's a yellow, it's a data only heard. If it's red, it's a not heard. If you're looking at the ISS, which I do have ISS FM on here, but there's a purple indication for if the ISS crew has been heard. So that's kind of a cool thing. I actually did work an ISS astronaut last summer. It was very random. I was very surprised. It blew me away. I was up on vacation in Wisconsin, and I had taken my rig with me, and I just decided we're waiting for the family to show up at the hotel. Let's go out and work an ISS pass. And suddenly I hear, this is NA1SS listening, and I threw out my call sign, and a couple seconds later, he came back. And so I have a QSL card to prove it. That's not very often. Even though most of the astronauts on the ISS are licensed hams, they're licensed mostly for the school contacts through ARIS. Every once in a while, you'll find a guy or a gal who will be interested in doing random contacts. And if you catch that, then you're doing really good. Another benefit of being an AMSAT member is the AMSAT Journal. And if you look at here, this is a depiction of what's called a grid heat map. Some of you who do VHF, UHF work also know there's some other stuff. Since a lot of folks collect grid squares, there are grid squares that are more wanted than others. And I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of them out in your neck of the woods that are more wanted than others. That's all I've got. Any questions?
There was a question from earlier on from Alex or Albert Straub. Do you design the boards with S-class parts? This was from very early on in the meeting.
S-class parts.
Yeah, when I was in aerospace, you had your was it MS-38 510 parts, and then you had an S on it for space qualified, because when you're up there, you get radiation and
Yep. Well, it's interesting. The guys who've been designing our stuff, I mean, yeah, they try to, the hope is to try to get it, especially if you're looking at an IHU, a processor, you want something that's radiation hardened. Um, you know, but, really what they're looking for is parts that are going to be reliable. And yes, one of the things that has to happen if you present any form of space vehicle to a launch provider, they make you go through what are called shake and bake tests, where they um, um, will go through vibration testing plus heat and cold testing, vacuum testing, and yes, you will want to anything that is going to be radiation sensitive, has memory on it. You will want to want to test. Now, one of the boards that was on several of our AMSAT satellites from Iowa State was a radiation effects experiment, and they took some memory chips, and they've been flying, and those chips have been flying for 5 or 6 years, and they look, they can the data downlink could show whether or not they had lost any bits due to radiation. I don't have any of the numbers on what they were using off-the-shelf components for that. So I don't have any information on what they ended up finding. I'm going to ask that question of some of the engineering folks if they ever got that answer from Iowa State. It'd be
yeah,
interesting
I'd
to
be
find out.
curious myself. And I also think about the fact that if you have a plastic encapsulate and it ends up being a bubble in there anywhere, and you show up in a vacuum, that
Oh, it's
it's
going to explode.
yeah.
So no, well, that's part of the deal in all the integration testing is you've got to prove that your satellite, your device is not going to cause damage to anything else on the launch vehicle or the other payloads. There might be 100, 10, 20, 30, 50, up to 100 small satellites being launched at the same time in some of these ride shares, and you don't want parts to be flying off and damaging another satellite. So we've had a couple of failures. I mean, space is hard. Um, Fox 1C AO95 turned out to be totally deaf in space. It did not hear any commands from the ground to turn itself on. So for 4 years, 5 years, it just sat there and announcing itself in safe mode every 2 minutes. AO109 Fox 1E, we don't think the antenna is deployed properly. And so they, and because of the high SWR, it burned out the power amp. So it was transmitting, but only at about 9 milliwatts. So you had to have a little bit of an antenna to be able to hear it. And so it was not as popular as it could have been. Yeah, the Chinese launched had a satellite with a couple of different transponders on it, VHF, UHF, and it even had a 15-meter uplink, 70-centimeter downlink. But it only lasted, that whole satellite only lasted about a month. And I kind of suspect that they had component issues there that caused it to degrade and stop working. So space is hard. You can't go up and grab it and bring it back.
Yeah, and you probably don't want fuses in it either because you're not going to replace them.
Nope, no fuses. I hope that
Hey, Tom,
I
you
know that's a
mentioned.
lot. What again? So
Oh, I'm sorry. You meant.
I had a couple questions if I could. First off, did Finland ever get their wooden one up?
I have never heard. I've heard about that. It was, of course, got reported as to, yeah, that's what they were wanting to do. And I don't remember ever hearing that it actually happened. Yeah, a lot of it's finding a launch availability. I'm sure that somewhere along the line, that's not going to have a tough time with shake and bake.
I
Um,
kind of figured.
I just kind of, the idea is nice, but I can kind of look at SpaceX going, eh. And
Second
what else?
serious question is, I understand the FCC has recently either proposed or has already taken up some new rules about destruction of the satellites to get rid of space junk.
Yes.
How's that going to impact the amateur process?
Oh, well, and that is a really good question. And it's still really, so the rule is that within 5 years of the end of mission, you have to either be able to deorbit the satellite or move it to a safer location. Well, both of which need some mechanism to deal with. Well, with a 1U CubeSat, like, that big, there's not a lot of room for propulsion, not a lot of room for like a solar sail or a drag line or something like that. So most of the small satellites these days are being launched under 500 kilometers. And what that does is give you a 4 to 7 year um, lifespan. Right, just within the next month or so, AMSAT Fox E A109, which was launched about 5 years ago, is probably going to have an orbit decay and re-enter. A couple of Chinese satellites that were launched in like 2016 or 2017, I think, are fixing to get real close because they were in like about 500 kilometers up. The higher up you get, the less drag. So that becomes the problem. We're still looking at, our organization and others, of course, are still looking for a higher orbit opportunities. But yes, so last year, one of our engineering guys got a hold of a development kit for a plasma thruster from a South African company. And that is like one option that our organization is looking at to affect the orbit of any of our future satellites. They haven't made a decision on that one yet, but that is something that it's called orbital debris mitigation. And any satellite that is launched that is made by the United States organization and maybe launched from a United States launch vehicle or spaceport has to fit in with the orbital debris mitigation rules.
Thank you.
Hey, Tom, I'd like to, this is Jerry, make an announcement, and then
Yeah.
Our drawing, if you're a DRC member, Jeff has put the link in the, I think we had 11 people last, he said. So if you're a DRC member, you want to throw your name in there. Uh-oh, I don't know what that was all about, but anyway, do it now if you would. And one of our members would like to say something after you're done, Tom, and then we'll go on to the drawing and finish out here. So,
I'm done. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm losing voice here, but thank you very much.
Understand.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope this didn't hope this didn't bore you to tears. I hope that you learned something. Good. And if you see somebody out at a hamfest doing a satellite demo, go follow them out there and see it for real. It's a lot of fun.
Okay. Hey, I got one quick question. You mentioned early on that, you got a free ride on some of these. If you had to pay for a launch, what would it cost roughly? Oh, you're muted, I believe.
There we go. Sorry about that. I was unclicking and I double clicked. I can only tell you what we paid about 7 years ago for a couple of we paid for 2 launches at once, and we paid 175,000 for the 2.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's that was a fairly good deal. And they ended up on 2
Okay.
separate launch vehicles because of the way manifesting happened.
All righty. Well, thank you for that. Interesting. Appreciate it. You taking the time to do this, and maybe something develops, something new will get you to come back at some point in time. So thank you very much. And you're muted again, I think, but
Keep me in mind. Keep me in mind.
we
A couple
sure
years
will.
down the road, we'll talk. Thank you. God bless.
Okay.
I just want to
Thank
catch
you.
him on Vera.
We'll do that.
Uh,
We'll do that. Remind me your call sign again.
AE0GQ.
AE0GQ. Okay, I will look that up this evening. Thanks much.
okay. Well, thank you. I lost my train of thought. Mark Strahan wanted to just take a minute to talk about a youth program. So, Mark, if you would be fairly short, appreciate it. Go ahead and make your announcement. I don't hear you or see you. Hello,
Hey.
Mark.
Got audio on me now?
You do now. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I wanted to touch base real quick with the group here. Let them know we're continuing. We're going to start working more on setting up the youth group. I need to talk to whoever does the website so we can start plans and how we're going to incorporate the youth program into the Denver Radio Club site. The basic plan is that this is going to be a youth-led activity with, adult mentorship. And of course, I've taken on that piece for the adult mentorship part for now. We'll see how long that goes into the future. It could be a lot of years. But I want the youth and the kids to get that leadership experience in working with each other. And of course, the kids know best about how to keep in constant contact. That's, of course, where we as hams have failed in an entire generation, is that we introduced, but we didn't keep constant contact and keep those who we introduced involved in the hobby. We have way too many electronics in the world right now, and the attention span of the youth is very short. So unless we kind of keep the constant contact going, you're going to lose those youth. So we want to kind of reverse that trend. On that note, I am going to be the director for the Yoda ham camp, which is going to be starting here pretty much on a permanent basis, starting in 2025. Lyle, KE0ZNB, my son, and I will be flying to Canada this year to kind of take the reins, per se, from the Yoda camp, which is in Halifax this year. So, but the plan is for Denver to become the permanent place for the Youth on the Air ham camp that happens every year. So don't be surprised to be seeing, public statements and whatnot about the Yoda camp coming here. Of course, as the Denver Radio Club is, me being the youth member there, I'm sure we're going to get a little bit of free press on that. Again, this is not something that is going to mandate a lot of time by anybody. But of course, there's always going to be spots in there if people want to volunteer their passions to teaching the youth. There's all kinds of little opportunities here and there. I've talked to the local balloon club and several different organizations to help out, but it's looking to be a hell of a camp, and I think it'll be really good for our club to be a part of it. So
Okay,
that's
well,
all
we
I
definitely need the youth for the hobby. And if you want to contact me offline, I'll get you to the right people for the website and all that. So,
Well, that sounds great. Like I said, we're proceeding. It's a little bit slow. We've had a lot going on in the last year. Wanted to be a lot further along than we are now, but losing my father to a silent key now this last year, and yeah, things have been really pretty busy around our household. Had to spend about 6 weeks in California and clearing out my folks, and now have my mom here, who's N5HYP. A whole family of hams. So, but anyhow, we're kind of continuing on now. I didn't want any surprises if somebody saw things on the internet and it included DRC. But I think it's going to be a great time. And again, it's in 2025. It's going to be the next camp. So we're talking about over a year from now. So I'll be more in touch with the club and more of the meetings and as we can here to keep everybody filled in. Great presentation on the satellites. Lyle here, he's really starting to get into it. He's actually contacted the ISS, and we're now building up our big portable station that has the azimuth and an elevation rotator on a tripod, and we're building up a go box with the whole bit. So we'll have something that will be available for when we're doing club stuff, or those kinds of things people want to see.
Yeah, we might think about some of that for our DRC Saturday thing. So I'm gonna so we don't keep anybody too long. Appreciate all the info. We'll have more, and I'm glad you're back and doing better. The family stuff definitely sometimes gets in the way of life there. So thanks for all of that. And Jeff, I think everybody's had ample opportunity to put their name in the hat if they so desire. So roll it and pick the ticket, and we'll get everybody out of here.
Okay, we had 13 entries. The winner is Mark Strakan. Did I pronounce your name right, Mark? Congratulations, KD6 IQW.
Well, thanks, guys.
Okay.
Yeah, it's close enough. I've never required anybody to get my last names right because there's too many versions. But thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, congratulations.
Thanks.
And anyway, I don't have anything else unless anybody's got a final comment. We'll kick you out of here. And thanks everybody for your time, and very interesting program tonight. And appreciate Tom doing that. So with that, hearing nothing, I will we'll adjourn. Thank you all.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Good night, 73 zone.
7-3.
Good night.
Thank you all. Take care.